bassline tutorial. This is the third one of 3 today. We're going to make a classic kind of Res bassline. My way of doing it. There's quite a few ways you can actually do this this bass, but this is my take on it. We're going to be using the analog in Ableton. It's a nice synth. It's a bit different than the operator. It's just got a really nice way of detuning stuff, and that's what we want. We want a nice detuned, grunty sound going on. So I've got a simple break here, which is just a drum and bass loop. I've just pulled out of my collection somewhere, just a random loop. So we're just going to have that going along just to help us so we can get a feeling for the actual bass line. So first thing I'm going to do is insert a new MIDI track, so Command-Shift-T, or you can go Create, Insert MIDI track. Now this is where we're going to create the actual bass line. Now what I'm going to do once we've actually created this bass line is I'm going to resample it and put it into a sampler to actually play it, because I'll explain that a little bit down the track, but it's a nice way to get a particular effect, but I'll explain that a little bit later. But for now we're just going to create the Res bassline. So I'm going to go over here, here's my analog, and I'm going to drop it down here into the instrument area down here. So we've got an analog there. Let's chuck in a MIDI clip, Command-Shift-M right here, open it up in the piano roll, and let's put in a note. Let's use C1 and let's make it a long note, and let's have a listen to that. The velocity's down for some reason at 100. So I'm just going to solo the bass line here and play. Now the first thing we can hear, a new version of Adobe update was no thank you. First thing we can hear is that there is an envelope on the amplitude. So you can hear the note plays and then it quietly dies down, the volume fades away. We don't want that, so let's go over to the amplitude area of the analog. Now of course this amplitude is affecting this oscillator here. So the way the analog path goes, it goes oscillator, filter, and then amplitude. So with the amplitude, when we click on this area you can see the actual envelope here, and we can see it starts loud and dies down quietly. We don't want that for now, so what we're going to do is bring sustain up to its absolute maximum value. This means that the note will continue to play as long as the note has actually been playing here in the MIDI clip here. So let's have a listen to that. Nice solid note. You hear when I push spacebar it actually faded away. We don't actually want that either, so we're going to bring the release time down, this being how long the note actually stays playing for once it stops and how quickly it dies away. So we're going to bring that down to absolute, or the smallest value. So when I stop, it completely stops the note. That's great. Standard saw wave, that's all we've got, and it's a good starting point. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is if we look down here, we've got a second oscillator here. Now this second oscillator, analog has 2, the second one we're going to turn it on, and you can see we've got a sawtooth wave. It's exactly the same as settings as this, so when we hit play we're going to get basically 2 oscillators playing the exact same note, exact same pitch, exact same waveform. It's all very nice and pure. Now, the interesting part here is when we use this detune knob on both of these oscillators. You'll hear as I slowly detune this particular oscillator up, it's going to slowly pitch up this particular oscillator. So it's going to be a little bit out of tune from this one, which creates a nice kind of phasing effect, which is the start of the kind of grunty sound that we want. So if I play this note and bring this up, hear that great phasing effect going on, the waveforms kind of fighting with each other. Really, really cool. Now as I've brought this one up, I'm actually going to bring this one down to kind of cancel it, well not cancel it out, even it out, so that they're both detuned. One's detuned down, one detuned up, and they kind of meet around the 0 value, kind of. So let's play this together. Very nice, so we're actually getting somewhere rather quickly here. Great. Okay, now the next thing we can do with the analog, which is fantastic, is if we go over here to this this area over here, highlight it, we've got this button here called Unison, or Uni. If we turn this on, it's going to stack up multiple voices for us on what we've already got going on. So by turning this on, these 2 parameters become available. You can see we've got a drop down menu where we can pick 2 or 4 voices, and we can also detune those stacked voices from the originals even more, and this just makes it wider, fatter, and just adds a little bit more chaos. So let's have a listen without it and with it. Very cool. Now let's detune those new voices. Excellent. Let's see what it sounds like with 4. That's pretty cool. Very, very, very wide. This other little area here defines how long it takes for those voices to actually kick in, but we don't want to mess with that for now. So that's a pretty heavy sound already. Let's just tweak this a little bit. Nice, I like that. So that's kind of a really basic kind of resound. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of modulation on here. So I'm going to use an auto filter. We're going to drag it down. So an auto filter, of course, do nice cut-off stuff, but we're not going to do that kind of cut-off stuff or that kind of modulation just yet. We're going to use this as another way to get a kind of a little rhythmical feeling going on here. So over here where we can select the different types of filters, we're going to select the notch filter. Now the notch filter is an interesting one because it subtracts the frequencies out of this little notch here. Everything inside here and everything inside here is playing. Remember, this is your frequency and this is your volume, so to speak. So as this just very subtly subtracts frequencies, and this can sound quite cool when you've got a really wide sound happening. So let's play the sound and move this around. Great. Now, but what we want to do is we want to automate this this frequency of this this notch filter here, and we can do that with the LFO section over here. So if we turn the amount up, so this is defining how much of the LFO, the low frequency oscillator, is going to modulate this notch filter here. So let's bring this up. Very, very cool. You can hear a lot of phasing going on in the stereo field. If you're listening in headphones, you'll be able to notice that quite drastically. That's because the phasing is on 100%. If we turn this down, we don't want this now. We can add it later if we want, but we don't want it for now. So I've just brought that down. Excellent. Now, this is the rate of the LFO. This is how fast it's going. So if we make this go really fast, and at the moment it's free, it's not fixed, it's not attached to a beat. We actually want it attached to a beat, so if we look over on this little note here, we can turn this into sync mode. So now this turns into fractions of how fast this is actually going to go. So if we have it on 1 bar, you can hear it goes up and down every bar. Very, very. It's okay. Let's make it a little bit shorter. Let's try half. Let's make it a quarter. See how that sounds. Not bad. I'm just going to tweak the resonance here up and down, left and right for the frequency. We can use these if we want, but this will work for us. And I'm just going to find a sweet spot. That sounds good to me. Now, the reason that we've chosen to have this slight modulation going in sync to the beat is because we're going to actually resample the sound right now. We're going to resample it into a WAV file. So the way we do that is we're going to create a new audio track, or Command T if you like, and this is our new audio track. Let's rename this to Resampled, and over here in our kind of routing area, we can select this drop-down box which defines where the sound is actually coming from to this audio track. So we can actually select from this drop-down box. You see we've got our one audio up here, which is our beat. We'll quickly rename this to beat so it's less confusing. So if we go down to this drop-down menu of the input of the audio track, you can see we've got beats and we've got bassline, and then we've got our 2 return tracks which we aren't using. I'm going to select bassline, so that means that this audio track is now listening to whatever comes out of this bassline. So what that means is if I arm this track for recording, and I push record up here, making sure this is set on bassline, and I push spacebar, I push play, and now it's resampled that for us. You notice that I accidentally had looping on and it slipped back to the start of the loop, and it recorded a little bit at the start. The way I got around that, you can see that little chunk there, the way I got around that is I simply pushed Command Z or undo after that I recorded, and Ableton knows that you didn't mean to do that, so it just gets rid of that for you. So now we've got this great sampled, look at that waveform, it's such a mess. Love it, look at that. Alright, so That's cool, we've got that sound resampled. Let's just solo that and have a listen. Gets nice and wide at the end. Now what we're going to do is insert one more MIDI track here, and we'll just call this sampled for now, and we're going to load in a sampler here and drop this sample into it. This is where the fun parts happen. So I'm going to use a simpler here. We won't use the sampler because it's a little bit got too many things for us in this particular tutorial. So we'll double click this, we'll drag the simpler down here. So this is a simpler, which is it's a sampler. Don't get confused with the sampler, which is actually a sampler. This is a simpler, which is a simple sampler. So this is where we can actually drop sounds and resample things or anything you like and actually play them like they're a synth or like they're an instrument. So we can do this by taking this bass line that we've resampled and dragging it to where it says drop sample here, and you can see it's dropped it in for us. That's excellent. So I'm going to desolo this. I'm going to mute it, mute it, mute it. Now we have this sampler ready to be played basically with that resample. So I'm going to insert a MIDI clip here. And of course, we're going to have to be dealing with C3 here. So C3 is always the note which plays the original pitch of the sample. So if I drag this out like this, just bring this velocity up a bit. For some reason, it's gone down, and we'll play this. You can actually hear we're playing the sample that we resampled from the synth. Now this is where the fun part starts. Because we've resampled this, if we were to change the pitch of the note up to a higher pitch, that modulation that we put on here with this auto filter, which was going in time, is actually going to speed up because the waveform is getting compressed as we go higher. So therefore the wobbling effect is actually going to speed up, which is quite a cool sound. For example, let's play it again, just raw. Very cool. Now if I was to put a note an octave above, exactly an octave above, so this is a C3, I'm going to play a C4, have a listen. Now the great thing about this is if you go directly an octave above, just like waveforms double when you go up an octave, the actual modulation doubles, so it is still actually in sync with us. So it's actually going double the speed, the wobble's going double the speed up here than it is down here. Very, very cool. Also, if we were to go down to a perfect fifth, which is a G, hear how it's still in time because a perfect fifth above C is 1.5 times mathematically multiplied by 1.5, so therefore this wobble is actually going to be actually related to the original wobble, which it's really, really, really cool. It's a kind of a new depth, a new way of thinking about modulation. Anyway, so let's just put in some notes here and get some fun happening. So again, I'm just going to go around and trial and error and put some notes in for you here, try and do it as quickly as I can. See what happens if we put one down really low. So this will be 0.5 times the modulation. That's really cool. I'm going to make this note here the lowest. In fact, let's select all the notes, Command A, hold Shift, push down. Let's bring it all down an octave. Very cool. Now one thing we can do here, if we go back into the sampler, you see we've got this glide section here. This adds an element of gliding between the notes. So instead of going straight to a certain pitch every time a note plays, you can actually say I want it to take a certain amount of time to actually build up to that note, which always sounds really, really good with these kind of bass lines. So let's turn the glide on. So I'm going to select this drop down menu and I'm going to select glide. we'll leave the time at 50 for now. There won't be any, you won't be able to hear any change right away. Because if we need to go in here and we need to adjust the lengths of the notes so they overlap a little bit. So I'm just holding down the command key here so it doesn't snap to the grid. If I don't hold down the command key, see it snaps. It's going to hold it down and just give it a little bit of a push at the end of each note, like this, like so. We go up there. That sounds good. Let's have a listen. Let's bring the time up. Starting to sound good. Let's just change this here. I don't like these notes. Just adjusting the end of this one so it glides as well. Great, so we've got a nice little Reese line going on here as far as the melody goes. One thing I'm going to do though is let's try and fatten it up a little bit more now. Now we can really muck with it and change sounds and add things like, I don't know, if we could add a flanger and a few things like that. Let's see what we can do. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click here and I'm going to group this track. So now it's turned it into an instrument rack for us. So an instrument rack means we can actually stack multiple versions of instruments and samplers and anything that we want into this instrument rack by using these things called chains here. So you see we've already got one chain here, which is this original simpler that we've used. I'm going to rename this and let's call this high. This is what I usually do if you're familiar with my videos. I do this quite a lot to get separate the sub end from the high end, so the sub is nice and pure, and then you can muck around with the high end and not worry about doing anything wrong to the sub. So I'm going to click on this chain, or right click on it and select duplicate. So it's duplicated an exact copy for us, and I'm going to rename this one here to sub. So now if we solo this chain, you hear they're both exactly the same at the moment. I'm going to solo this one and I'm going to load in an EQ8 after it. So I'm clicking and I'm dragging and I'm getting it right after it, not here because that'll apply the EQ8 to the whole rack. We don't want that, we want it to apply just to the sub. So we're going to grab this and drag it back to here, and I'm going to turn this top pole into a high cut like so, and we're going to drag this down until we can just hear the sub. Not bad. Let's give it a wee bit of a boost. So I've got that at about 130 Hertz. Let's bring it up a little bit more, maybe 150, just so we get this high note. Excellent. Now we have to do the same thing to the high end, but in reverse. So let's load an EQ8, turn this pole into a low cut, and put it roughly where we had it before, just so there's no sub coming through. So we need to quickly solo this channel. I'm just going to turn it up a bit. It's a bit naughty way to do it, but it's where it's a bit low in volume because of the sampling. So let's listen to them both together. Excellent. Now we can play with this high. Let's start doing some stuff. Let's give it a wee bit of EQing for a start. We can use this EQ here. Sounds good. Let's put a flanger after it. Flangers are always fun on Reese bass lines. It'll be pretty extreme, but we'll have to tweak it a bit. Let's listen. Really extreme. Let's bring the feedback down on the flanger. You can hear the phasing happening here. Remember, this was happening when we did it on the original bass line here. We had the phasing up, so we don't want that. Oh, maybe we do. It sounds pretty good. Maybe not so extreme though. Actually, it sounds pretty good. Let's change the delay time a little bit, see what we can get. Very cool. I'm just going to go in here and change this note here. Actually, what we could do is let's go back to the sampler. Remember we were playing with this glide time here. Let's actually go into and automate the glide time a little bit for this last note. Make it really, really, really long. So see, as I move this glide up and down, you can see the red line that corresponds with the glide pops up for us, and that means we can select a chunk like this chunk here. We can click the line and we can drag it up. So it's quite high, you know. So let's drag it up to, let's try 1.75 seconds. So that's going to kick in. It's going to kick in from 364 milliseconds here to 1.75 here, which means this note, this big octave leap here is gonna glide up a lot slower than the rest. Have a quick listen. Actually, I've done this wrong. I'm going to Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. Because we've already duplicated our chain, we've actually got two chains happening here. It's only affecting one, so it's either going to be affecting the sub or the high, which is a big no-no. So let's use macros here. Macros are these great 8 knobs which allow us to assign any of the parameters or multiple parameters within anything in our instrument rack to one knob. So I'm going to do that by going into map mode. So now all of these parameters turn green, just like if you were in MIDI mode or key mode. I'm going to select time of the first chain, the first simpler in the first chain, and I'm going to map it to macro, that macro there. I'm going to go into the second instrument or simpler here, and I'm going to go over and also map that time to the same knob. So now if we leave map mode, this knob now affects the time of both of them together. So we can actually use this knob now to actually draw a curve, and it will affect the time, the glide time of both of those simplers. If we move this knob, you can actually see over here, over on the time with the little green dot, you can actually see it. It moves with us. So let's find what we had it, roughly where we had it before. Very cool. So now if we move this macro, you see we've got a macro red line. Now we can select it and we can drag it up. Let's see how that sounds. It's a little bit too slow. Let's drag this down a bit. Still a little bit too slow. Still a little bit too much, I think. That sounds good. Okay, let's go back to changing the sound here. What could we do? What could we do? We could, okay, let's try this. Let's, again, we're going to take this high chain, and we're going to duplicate it. Boom. So now we have two highs. Now you'll notice the fantastic thing that happens here is because we've duplicated it, the glide time of that particular new chain that we've created on the simpler is automatically mapped to this macro knob. So now we don't actually have to remap it. This is a great little shortcut. So now we've got two. We'll call this high 2, and we'll do something a little bit different with this high 2. Let's just solo it and have a listen. We'll get rid of the flanger. And let's put an auto filter after it, and we'll turn it into a bandpass. So let's move this around. That sounds good. Let's give it some LFO amount. Bring the phasing completely down. Bring the rate up to speed it up a bit. And let's sync it. Let's make it a bar. Let's make it 2 bars long. And I wonder what it would sound like with a reverb. I'm breaking rules here by trying to design this sound without having the other elements going, but I like to do it that way sometimes because it can be quite exciting when you put it all back together and it sounds good. Or it can sound ass, but hey, it's a good fun gamble. Turn the high cut off on the reverb, so I'm just giving it a bit more decay time. Let's add in the other 2, see how it sounds. So I'm just going to de-solo it. Let's try adding a redux in between the EQ and the auto filters, and downsample the sound a bit, see how that sounds. Gonna bring the cutoff point of this bandpass filter down. Too much reverb there, so I'm going to bring the decay time down. Actually, let's bring the size down and see what that sounds like. Right down to a very short amount. We can change the shape of the LFO on the auto filter here, this bandpass filter. We could change it to a sawtooth going up. So instead of going up and down, it's only going to go up and then it's going to snap back down. It's starting to sound pretty cool. Let's put the drum beat in. So I'm just going to go into this MIDI clip, change the notes around a wee bit. That reverb is a wee bit too overpowering, so let's bring this decay time down even more. Actually, let's bring the dry wet down. So this is how much of the reverb is actually coming through. Let's put the phasing up here, see what happens. And the last thing I'm going to do here, I'm really liking this is a cool sound, is I'm going to chuck a compressor over it, and let's go into the sidechain panel, we'll turn on sidechaining, and we'll take the audio input from beats. So that means that this compressor is going to kick in when the beats are playing, and what we can do is we can actually turn an EQ on there. So this is so we can actually set that to a high cut, so it's going to take the beats, but it's only going to take the lower end. We can define how low this goes by this knob here, and I'm doing this so that when the kick drum from the beat plays, it's going to get out of the way a little bit. So it's going to duck. The bass line's going to duck out of the way so that the kick drum can come through. So let's just have a quick listen. I'm going to solo this again, and what we can do is turn on this headphone to actually listen to what's actually coming in. So you can hear that EQ there if it was off. On. Gonna bring it right down. Bringing the Q up a bit, just so we can get the bass of the kick going. Very cool. Now if we turn this off and have a listen, and bring the threshold down. Excellent. Let's just make one quick more melody just so we can really make this example. So I just selected all in, sorry, I just selected everything that I've done, boom, 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 and hit Control D, duplicate, move the loop point across, and let's just make a quick new melody here. So I'm going to delete these notes. Let's make a... Just going to go and get rid of that time automation that we had. So we go back on the glide, so let's just go back to the glide time. We'll delete that for this one. We don't need it. Delete. Whoops. Command delete. Command delete deletes just the automation, not the actual clip. Very cool. So I like that. That's my take on a Res, and I hope you've got something from that, and you're really open to what you can do when you get it to that final sampled stage and you're playing with the high end of things. You can add all kinds of crazy effects to give it really grunty sounds. Just remember to keep that sub nice and clean if you really want it to be punchy. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you check out number 4 coming soon. Cheers, TomCosm.com.